I sat at the budget meeting trying to focus. The numbers were all blurring together. But honestly, my mind wasn't on the spreadsheets. The conference room was stuffy, the air thick with the buzz of everyone else's nervous energy. I could feel my phone vibrating in my pocket, but I ignored it. It wasn't until the meeting ended that I checked. 15 texts. The first one from Matt. "Dude, your girl is losing it on Insta Live." I frowned, swiping through them, all of them saying the same thing. I opened Instagram, my pulse quickening. Sure enough, there she was, Liv, sitting in our apartment, looking directly at the camera with this smug, almost theatrical expression. The receipt in her hand was the first thing I noticed, a lock and deadbolt kit dangling from her fingers. She was breaking up with me on Instagram Live. I froze, staring at her. She was saying something about taking control of her life and changing the locks while I was at work. The comments on the stream were flying in. People cheering her on, telling her how strong she was, how she was finally taking her power back. I could barely process it. This wasn't real. Her voice rang through the speakers, mocking me. "I'm going to change the locks while he's gone. This is my space now. You can't just ignore me like that. I'm reclaiming what's mine." I didn't move, didn't even blink. I wasn't going to let this escalate. My mind was clear, calculating. I called building security while still watching her, a sick feeling crawling up my spine as she ranted on about evicting me from her apartment. I felt something inside snap, but I held my ground. I grabbed my coat and started heading for the door. It was going to get worse before it got better, but at least I wasn't blindsided anymore. I could hear her voice through the phone as I stepped off the elevator. Still going, still rambling about taking control. I was already halfway to the door when I noticed the drill on the hallway floor. My chest tightened. I pushed the door open quietly, keeping my phone in hand, the live stream still running. There she was, sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by lock parts, a drill at her side, looking like she was preparing to wage war. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes lighting up with this weird, almost smug satisfaction. "Look who decided to show up," she said, her voice laced with something venomous, but almost too calm. "Time to pack your things." I took a deep breath, the anger bubbling in my chest, but I kept my tone level. "The apartment's in my name. You don't have any right to change the locks." Her eyes narrowed, and I could see her thinking, looking for a way to twist this into something else. "I've been living here for months," she said, her voice rising, trying to convince the camera more than me. "This is common law. I have just as much right to be here as you do." I stared at her, forcing myself not to snap back. She was pushing, hoping for a reaction, but I wasn't going to give her that. "You're not on the lease. This is my apartment. You're trespassing." The live stream was still on, and I could hear the comments pouring in, everything from "get him girl" to people asking if I was really going to let her kick me out. I looked at the phone in my hand. I didn't need this circus. I pulled my coat tighter around me and stood my ground. "You're not staying here. You need to go." Her eyes flashed with anger, and for a moment, I saw the mask slip, just a crack. But then the doorbell rang, and she quickly shifted, putting on that performance face again. "Security." I stepped aside to let them in, but I didn't make a move toward her. I wasn't here to argue. I wasn't here for her drama. The older officer, a tall, graying man, looked around the room and raised an eyebrow at the drill and the receipt still clutched in her hand. She immediately went into overdrive. "This is misogynistic," she snapped, spinning to face the officer. "You're going to side with him? This is an abuse of power. He's throwing me out and you're just letting it happen." The officer didn't respond to her, just glanced at me and then back at her. I saw him briefly scan the lease paperwork I had left on the counter. The situation was about to go from messy to over. After a long, tense pause, he turned to her. "You're not on the lease. This is his apartment. You're trespassing." I could see the moment her facade cracked. Her hands shook a little, and her face paled. The camera was still rolling, and I caught her eyes flick to it before she forced a smile, trying to maintain the act. "You can't do this to me," she muttered, barely holding it together. This is my apartment. I don't care what the lease says. I've been living here. I didn't budge. The officer's right. You need to leave. Now. Security took a step forward. The younger guy, still trying to keep his cool, spoke up. We're not going to put up with this. You've been asked to leave, and if you don't, we'll have to call the police. I could see her panic rising, but she held up the phone like a shield. You're not going to get away with this? She spat at me, her voice shaky but still loud. People will see what's happening. The comments on her stream were bouncing from support to disbelief. People started calling her out. She wasn't the victim here, at least not the way she wanted them to believe. The officer stood there, unflinching. We've already asked you to leave. You've got your chance. I was calm, but inside, it felt like a war had started. This wasn't just about an apartment anymore. It was about control. But the truth was, she didn't have it. Not anymore. She dropped the lock kit, and for a second I almost felt bad for her. This twisted performance trying to make it seem like she was in the right. But then she shot me one last look, like she was daring me to react. I wouldn't. 15 minutes, the older officer said. That's all you've got. I felt a strange sense of relief as he turned and started to usher her toward the door. The performance was over, but I knew it wasn't really done. She'd find another way to make sure everyone knew her side. As the officer continued to keep a watchful eye on her, I pulled out my phone and called security again. I kept my voice steady, even as I could feel the anger rising. She's trying to illegally evict me, I said, my eyes locked on Liv. She's changing the locks and broadcasting it on Instagram Live. You need to get up here. I didn't give her the satisfaction of reacting when she whipped her head toward me. Her eyes wild, but she was getting desperate. The live stream was still rolling, and the comments were coming in fast. Half of them telling her to stand strong, the other half laughing at the spectacle she was making of herself. I caught a glimpse of some of them. Girl, you're out of control. Who does this to someone they love? Are you really airing your dirty laundry like this? Liv's voice rose, her hands shaking as she clutched her phone. This is MY apartment, she yelled, trying to address the growing number of viewers. I'm not being treated fairly. He's trying to kick me out for no reason. This is misogyny. Pure and simple. You see this? He's throwing me out like I don't even matter. She shot me a look, eyes glittering with a twisted mix of fury and desperation. You're cold. You're heartless. You can't even give me 5 minutes to get my things together. I didn't flinch. You have 30 minutes. Pack your things and leave. This is my apartment, not yours. The younger security officer, the one who hadn't said much until now, stepped forward, trying to hide his smile. Ma'am, you're committing a crime. You need to pack your things and leave. We're not putting up with this. Liv was absolutely losing it. No, this is all I have left. You can't just throw me out. I have rights, she shouted at him, voice cracking, but the officer didn't back down. He was calm, like this was just another day for him. I didn't want to let myself feel sorry for her. I couldn't afford to. She was making a scene, and the longer she went on, the harder it was to pretend this wasn't some kind of sick, twisted performance. But I had to stay calm. She turned back to the camera, her voice shaking but trying to keep it steady for her followers. Look at this, guys, she said, holding the phone at arm's length. I'm being mistreated. He doesn't care. He's throwing me out for no reason. He doesn't love me. He never did. I could hear the hum of the comments in the background, a mix of sympathy and ridicule. It wasn't long before she started shoving things into garbage bags. Clothes, books, random junk. The scene was escalating fast, but she wasn't finished yet. She yanked the PlayStation controller off the TV stand and stormed over to the couch, holding it like a weapon. My stomach dropped. Are you seriously taking that? I asked, voice calm but steady. I paid for this too, she snapped, her hands trembling as she swung it toward the TV. Before I could react, she hurled the controller at the screen. It hit the edge with a sickening crack, the sound of it vibrating through the room. My chest tightened as I stared at the TV, now cracked and useless. The younger officer raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, If you damage any more property, we're calling the cops. She paused, just long enough for the words to sink in. I don't care, she said through clenched teeth, but she didn't throw anything else. Instead, she stuffed the controller into a bag, still fuming, muttering under her breath about how unfair everything was. I stood there, watching her pack, while the older security officer kept his distance, just waiting for her to leave. Her whole body was shaking now, the reality of the situation finally setting in. The live stream was still going. Her followers were turning on her, but she was too deep in her narrative to see it. The comments were brutal now. Girl, just leave. You're embarrassing yourself. Why are you still there? Liv's hand trembled as she stuffed more clothes into the trash bags, her face flushed and angry. You're all going to regret this, she hissed, like she was trying to convince herself as much as the people watching. He's kicking me out and none of you care. This is wrong. The security officer gave her the look, then turned to me. She's got 30 minutes. After that, she's trespassing. If she doesn't leave, we'll call the police. I nodded, keeping my gaze locked on her. She didn't stop ranting, still trying to turn the whole thing into a tragic story for her followers. But I was done listening. It felt like I was watching some kind of twisted play unfold, and I was just a spectator, even though it was my life on the line. As the minutes ticked by, Liv's movements became more frantic, but it wasn't helping her image anymore. The comments section was blowing up with a mix of mockery and concern for her mental state. She was losing control and I could feel the shift. It was too late for her now. The live stream was ending, but not before her audience turned on her. With a final shove, Liv managed to pack everything, the last of her things stuffed into garbage bags. She looked up at me one last time, fury in her eyes, but I stayed quiet, not engaging. The phone screen flickered as she shut off the camera. The live stream ended. She was done. I didn't even want to check my phone, but as soon as I stepped into the apartment, I knew I had to. Liv's live stream was already blowing up across social media. It wasn't just people I knew. It was everywhere. My friends and family were texting me in a rush, all of them either shocked, confused, or pissed. Most of them had seen the broadcast. I scrolled through the messages, my jaw clenching tighter with every one. What happened? She really did that? Bro, she's acting like you kicked her out for no reason. I had a sinking feeling, but I couldn't look away. I opened Instagram. Her feed was filled with posts. The top one, illegal eviction, wrongfully treated. This is how men treat women when they don't get their way. Her face was plastered all over it. Eyes wide, looking broken. A victim. She had that look down. I felt a wave of irritation, and I almost swiped away from her profile, but I held my ground. I kept scrolling. She'd posted a video from earlier, the one where she claimed I was abusing my power to throw her out of our apartment. Even though the reality was so far removed from that, it was almost laughable. In another post, she talked about emotional distress and how this had ruined her life. The comments were coming in fast. Some people were rallying behind her, her loyal followers, but most were calling her out. I wasn't the only one who saw through her. But what really got under my skin was the hashtag. Hashtag justice for her. It was trending. I closed the app, but it was everywhere. Twitter, Facebook. Her story was spreading like wildfire. It didn't matter that she was in the wrong. She was making people believe that I was some kind of villain. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from my lawyer. I didn't even need to hear the words. Just the tone of his voice told me everything. You saw what happened, right? Yeah, I saw, I said, staring at the wall, feeling my blood pressure tick up. She's trying to spin this into something legal. She's already planning to file claims for damages. Emotional distress, harassment, the whole thing. I rubbed my temples, trying to focus. I wasn't surprised. Nothing about her behavior so far had been grounded in reality. She's lying, I said flatly. He sighed, a mixture of exasperation and reassurance in his voice. Of course she is, but we need to be prepared. You need to save every post, every screenshot, and every comment. If she's serious about trying to drag you into a legal battle, We've got to have everything we need to shut it down. I wasn't worried about the truth. I was worried about the chaos she could cause. She was good at manipulating people, and she had a pretty big audience. People who didn't know the full story. People who would just see her version and take it at face value. Got it, I muttered, already opening Instagram again, taking screenshots of her posts. Good, my lawyer said. I'll stay on top of things. But I wouldn't be surprised if she tries to take this further. It's a game to her, and she's playing it to win. I ended the call, and for the next hour, I did nothing but save posts, scrolling through the endless wave of comments, her followers tearing into me. Some of them were attacking me for what she had said, calling me cold, heartless, a liar. I could almost feel the heat of their anger, and it gnawed at me. She had somehow managed to twist the whole thing into her being the innocent party, when the evidence was staring them right in the face. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't bother to look. I already knew what it was. More people texting me. More people talking about her posts, wondering what was really going on. I took a deep breath. I wasn't going to let her win like this. I wasn't going to get caught in her web. But something about the whole thing, the way she was spinning the narrative, left a bitter taste in my mouth. She was good at this. Too good. I was sitting in my lawyer's office, feeling like a fish out of water. It was just a small, quiet place, but the walls were covered in law books, the kind that made me feel like I was in over my head. I sat across from Dan, who'd been my lawyer for a while now, but today I could barely hold it together. Dan leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, a small grin pulling at the corners of his mouth. He had this way of making things feel less like a fight and more like a conversation, even when the stakes were high. "You're telling me she's trying to make a case out of this?" he asked, eyebrow raised, as I ran through the basics of what had happened. "Yeah," I said, my hands rubbing against the side of my jeans. "She's claiming emotional distress, harassment, pretty much everything she can think of." He snorted, the laugh short but honest. "She's joking, right? There's no case here. None. She's the one committing crimes, trying to change locks without your permission, filming it all, making up lies. She's shot herself in the foot." I didn't laugh, but hearing him say it out loud gave me a weird sense of relief. I had been so caught up in the flood of social media, the backlash, the pressure, I hadn't even realized how badly she'd set herself up. He leaned forward, tapping a pen against the desk. "We've got everything we need. The video of her admitting she's not on the lease. The damage to your door. The harassment. She's practically handing us a case." "I didn't even think about the door," I said, nodding slowly. "She really screwed it up with that." Dan nodded, looking over some of the materials I'd sent him. "She's going to make it worse for herself. Trust me, this kind of public attention, it never goes the way people expect. She's got a ton of people backing her right now, but they're all just fueling her delusion. It'll burn out eventually, especially when the truth starts coming out." I felt my shoulders loosen a little, but the tightness in my chest still hadn't fully let up. "So what should I be doing?" Dan sat up straight, eyes focused. "First, you keep saving everything. Posts, comments, any direct messages, all of it. If she keeps spinning this story, it only helps us. We're going to counterclaim for property damage, your door, and harassment, maybe defamation too. You can't let her get away with this." I rubbed my hands through my hair. "And if she keeps pushing it? What if she tries to take it further?" Dan's face was serious now, but not worried. "If she keeps escalating, we'll take action. We could file for a restraining order if she starts showing up uninvited, or if she keeps harassing you online. If she gets worse, we'll file a lawsuit for defamation. But honestly, at this point, you just need to keep your head down and let her burn out." I nodded, the plan starting to take shape in my mind. Still, the whole thing felt surreal. How had we gotten here? How had she managed to twist something so simple into a full-on media circus? "I just don't get it," I said, shaking my head. "How could she turn this into something where she's the victim? It's like she's playing a role, trying to convince herself she's right." Dan sat back, tapping his pen on the desk again, his eyes narrowing. "People like her? They live for the drama. It's not about being right, it's about winning. And when they don't win, they make everyone else look like the bad guy, even if they have to lie and manipulate their way through it. The people supporting her, they're caught up in the act. They don't care about the truth. They care about the performance. That hit hard. I had seen it, scrolling through the comments, watching her weave this web of lies, people eating it up. But Dan was right. She wasn't looking for justice. She was looking for an audience. The next thing I knew, the phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my sister. I hadn't even realized I'd been clenching my phone in my hand until I saw the message. I just saw Liv's post. What the hell? Is she really saying you kicked her out and she's the victim? I stared at the message for a second, trying to push back the irritation rising in my chest. Yeah, that's exactly what she's saying, I muttered, more to myself than to Dan. Dan raised an eyebrow. It's gonna be a storm for a little while, but the truth always comes out. You're in the clear. Just keep everything documented, stay calm, and let her keep digging her hole. She's got no case, and when this blows over, she'll have a whole lot of nothing. I nodded slowly, finally feeling some of the tension leave me. Okay, I'll do that. Dan smiled, leaning back in his chair. Good. I'll keep an eye on things from my side. But you've got the upper hand here. She's the one who's in trouble. I wanted to believe that, and for the first time in a while I did. But the whole thing still felt ridiculous. The fact that we were even talking about legal claims, about counteractions, it was like something out of a bad movie. As I walked out of Dan's office, I felt a weird mix of relief and disbelief. The storm wasn't over, but for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. Liv might have been playing the victim for the cameras, but I had the truth on my side. And eventually, that was going to be all that mattered. It was just another quiet afternoon when the elevator dinged. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through more of the nonsense online. Liv's latest post was still up, spinning her version of everything. But as soon as I heard the knock on the door, something in my gut dropped. I knew it was her. I opened the door slowly, trying to keep my cool, and there she was, Liv standing in front of me with that same smug expression from earlier. But this time she wasn't alone. Her mother was there, too, eyes wide, face flushed, the picture of indignation. Open the door, Liv demanded, voice sharp. I need to get my things. I didn't budge. You're not welcome here, I said, keeping my tone steady, but firm. You're not an approved guest anymore. You've been banned from the premises. Her mother stepped forward, acting like the world was crumbling around her. You're a cold, heartless man, she spat. You're throwing her out on the street, abandoning her. You have no decency. You know she's pregnant, right? My blood ran cold. Pregnant? That was new. My eyes flicked to Liv, who was standing behind her mother, her arms crossed, staring at me with a twisted kind of satisfaction. I didn't know that, I said slowly, keeping my voice even. I'm sorry, but I'm not letting you in. Liv's mother wasn't finished. She's carrying your child, and you're just going to throw her out like this? You've ruined her. She's been through enough already. I blinked, caught off guard. The idea that she was pregnant, if it was even true, hit me harder than I wanted to admit. But I couldn't let that throw me off balance. I need proof, I said, my voice calm but firm. Show me something that proves you're pregnant. I'm not letting you in without that. Liv shifted behind her mother, fidgeting uncomfortably. But she didn't say anything. Neither of them produced anything. No doctor's note, no ultrasound, nothing. Just silence. I kept my gaze steady, even though I felt like I was losing the thread of control here. The situation was getting more absurd by the minute. Until you can show me something concrete, you're not getting in. Liv's mother threw her hands up, her voice rising. You're unbelievable. You're going to let your child's mother be out on the street? You're a disgrace. Liv's face flushed bright red, and she stepped forward, pushing her mother back just a little. Mom, stop. Her voice was shaky, but there was anger there too. Let's just go. But her mother wasn't ready to back down. No, he's not getting away with this. You'll regret this. She turned to me, her voice dripping with venom. This is on you. You've ruined everything. You'll pay for this." The more she ranted, the more I realized how much of this was just another play for attention. It wasn't about what was right or wrong anymore. It was about controlling the narrative. Again, I took a breath, calling security for the third time that day. "Yeah, we need help. My ex and her mother are here trying to get into my apartment. They're not on the approved guest list, and I need them removed." I stayed where I was, standing firm. Liv was getting visibly more agitated, her lips trembling with anger. "You're such a coward," she spat. "You're going to let them treat me like this? You really think people are going to believe you when they see this?" Her mother nodded, her eyes flashing with judgment. "He's the one who's wrong, Liv. Don't let him get away with this." I couldn't help but feel like I was stuck in some bizarre performance, like they were trying to turn this into a scene for an audience that wasn't even there. The whole thing was exhausting, draining, but I was done playing their game. The elevator dinged again, and two of the building's security guards walked in. They were both older men, the kind who had seen everything. The younger one was already looking at Liv's mother with an expression that said he wasn't buying it. The older guard looked at me. "Sir, you've called us 3 times now. What's going on?" I gestured toward Liv and her mother. "They're not welcome here. They're trying to get into my apartment without permission. I've told them they're banned, but they won't leave." Liv's mother tried to turn it into a spectacle again. "She's pregnant with his child. You're throwing her out like trash." Security didn't even flinch. The younger guy stepped forward, a professional calm in his voice. "Ma'am, unless you have legal proof of this pregnancy, you're trespassing. We've asked you to leave. Now it's time to go." Liv looked between her mother and me, her face twisted in fury, but she wasn't going to argue with security. Her mother, on the other hand, was still shouting. "You'll regret this, mark my words." The older officer didn't even bother to respond. "It's time to go. Now." The two of them were escorted out of the building, still shouting, still trying to make it look like I was the villain in all of this. As the elevator doors closed behind them, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I stared at the empty hallway for a few moments, trying to process how ridiculous this had all become. It wasn't even about the apartment anymore. It was just about power, manipulation, and a public spectacle. And I wasn't going to let her keep dragging me through it. I stood there for a long moment, trying to clear my head, but the truth was still sinking in. This wasn't just a breakup. This was a full-blown circus. And I wasn't going to let her be the ringmaster anymore. A few days after Liv and her mother's dramatic return to my building, I was sitting at my kitchen table, scrolling through emails when a thick envelope slid through the mail slot. I picked it up, instantly recognizing the return address. I opened it, my pulse quickening. Inside was a small claims court summons. Liv was suing me for $12,000. I stared at the paper for a long time, trying to make sense of it. Rent contributions, emotional distress, moving expenses, property damage. It was like she'd thrown everything into a blender and hoped it would stick. I was barely through reading it when my phone buzzed. It was a message from my lawyer. "Got your summons. Let's meet ASAP." I dialed his number, already feeling the irritation building. He picked up on the second ring. "Dan," I said, not even bothering with pleasantries. "I just got a small claims court summons from Liv. She's asking for 12 grand. Dan let out a short laugh. "I saw that coming. What's she claiming this time? The moon and the stars?" I read him the details, trying to keep my voice steady. "She's saying I owe her rent, moving expenses, and I caused emotional distress by..." "What?" "Breaking up with her." Dan chuckled again, this time without any humor. "She doesn't have a leg to stand on, man. None of this is real. The rent? She wasn't on the lease. Emotional distress? She's the one who put herself in this position. And the property damage? You have evidence that it was her fault. This is laughable." I felt a small wave of relief wash over me, but it didn't fully take away the frustration. "So what do we do?" "Same as before," Dan said. "You need to get everything together. Texts, screenshots, any evidence of her damaging your stuff. Everything. We'll be ready for her. I'll prepare our defense, but you need to keep an eye on her social media. She'll keep posting about this, trying to make herself out as the victim. I know, I muttered, already sick of seeing her face pop up everywhere. She's still spinning the story, taking him down and seeking justice. You know? Dan sighed. Yeah, I saw. But don't let it get to you. She's making a spectacle of herself, and people are seeing it for what it is. Focus on the facts. Stick to the truth. I hung up with a mix of annoyance and relief. Liv had been relentless, using social media to keep the story alive, framing herself as some poor soul who'd been wronged by the big, bad guy. I could already see the hashtags. Hashtag justice for Liv, hashtag team Liv, hashtag he ruined her life. But I wasn't going to let her keep playing that role. The days that followed were a blur. I spent hours compiling evidence, screenshots of her posts, the comments she'd made, and most importantly, the video of her on Instagram, admitting to trying to change the locks. I even took photos of the door she'd tried to damage. It was all there. Her lies, her manipulation, everything that proved she was the one in the wrong. I also kept an eye on her social media, of course. She was posting nonstop, talking about how she was going to take me down in court, how she'd been wronged, how she was the real victim here. It was like watching someone try to rewrite history in real time. One post caught my attention more than the others. She'd posted a picture of herself sitting on the floor, a sad look on her face, claiming she was fighting for her rights and fighting for justice. Underneath it was another hashtag. Hashtag he owes me everything. I rolled my eyes, scrolling past it quickly. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of responding. But despite how ridiculous it all seemed, the whole thing was wearing me down. Every time I saw her face or heard her name, I could feel my patience thinning. I was angry, not just at her for dragging me into this mess, but at myself for not seeing it coming. How had we ended up here? The court date was set for a few weeks out, and as much as I wanted to let it go, I knew I had to be prepared. I went over everything again and again, making sure I wasn't missing anything. Every text, every conversation, every piece of evidence was crucial. But the worst part? I knew this wasn't the end of it. Even if I won in court, Liv wouldn't just disappear. She'd keep fighting, keep making scenes. She wasn't done making me the villain of her story, and I was starting to get tired of playing along. I couldn't help but feel like I was living in a twisted version of my life, one where I was constantly on defense. I had the truth on my side, but what good was that when she had a whole army of people cheering her on, believing every word she said? The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept running through everything in my head, second-guessing myself. But when the morning finally came, I knew what I had to do. I had to show up, stick to the facts, and let the truth speak for itself. Because deep down, I knew that in the end, no amount of hashtags or lies would change what really happened. The day of the court hearing arrived, and the knot in my stomach never loosened. I wasn't nervous about the case. I was confident we had the truth on our side. But there was something about seeing Liv in that setting, on the other side of the courtroom, that made everything feel even more surreal. I walked in with Dan, my lawyer, and we took our seats. Liv was sitting with her mother, both of them looking like they were about to put on the performance of their lives. Liv's face was flushed, her eyes darting around the room, already looking like she was preparing to make herself the victim. Her mother was sitting beside her, talking quietly, likely coaching her on what to say next. I didn't look at them much, just focused on the judge as he took his seat, cleared his throat, and called the case. Dan wasted no time. Your Honor, I'd like to begin by presenting evidence that will clearly show my client's position here. He pulled out his laptop and connected it to the courtroom screen. A few clicks and there it was, the video. The one Liv had so carelessly posted on Instagram Live, where she was openly admitting to trying to change the locks while I was at work. The judge looked at the screen, his eyes narrowing as the video started playing. I sat back, folding my arms, trying to ignore the sick feeling twisting in my stomach. In the video, Liv was sitting on the floor of the apartment, holding up a lock kit and a receipt. She was speaking directly to the camera, explaining how she was going to take back control and change the locks. She even said point blank that I wasn't on the lease. The judge didn't say anything at first, just watching the video. The silence in the courtroom felt like it stretched on forever. When it ended, the judge looked up, his expression completely neutral. "Well, that seems pretty clear," he said, glancing at Liv. "Miss, you're on record here admitting that you were trying to change the locks and evict Mr. Protagonist's last name, and you've openly acknowledged that you were not on the lease. You've also admitted that you were not authorized to make those changes to the apartment." Liv shifted in her seat, her face flushing with embarrassment, but she quickly recovered. "That's not what I meant," she said, her voice rising. "I was just frustrated. He wouldn't listen to me. I wasn't trying to steal anything." The judge raised a hand, silencing her. "You're not on the lease. You didn't pay rent. And you tried to make unauthorized changes to someone else's property. Your actions here are not defensible." Liv's mother leaned forward, her voice sharp and desperate. "But she deserves something. She's been living there for months. This man is taking advantage of her. He's heartless." The judge's gaze turned to her, unflinching. "Ma'am, I understand that this is an emotional situation, but that doesn't change the facts. Miss Liv's last name has no legal standing here." The room fell silent again. Liv's deflection had already failed. The case was falling apart piece by piece. Dan flipped through some more papers and presented the final blows, the emotional distress and rent claims. "Your Honor," Dan continued, "Miss Liv's last name claims rent contributions and emotional distress, but the fact is, she was never on the lease. The claim for rent is baseless. As for emotional distress, her actions were self-inflicted, and we have evidence here of harassment, including a series of false public claims made on social media." The judge nodded, his pen moving across the paper. "I'm afraid there's nothing to substantiate those claims. Based on the evidence presented, I find no grounds for this case." Liv's face went pale. Her shoulders hunched slightly, as if she was bracing for impact. I could see the defeat creeping in, though she wasn't ready to admit it. The judge turned his attention to her. "Your case is dismissed. I'm also ordering that you pay the court costs for this hearing." Her mother's eyes widened in disbelief. She whispered something to Liv, but neither of them said anything else aloud. I stood up, the tension in my body easing as I finally exhaled, the weight of everything lifting off my chest. The judge's gavel came down with a sharp crack, and I felt a sense of finality flood over me. The case was closed. I made my way out of the courtroom with Dan, my thoughts still whirling. I couldn't believe it was over. I thought about the months of tension, the lies, the chaos, but I wasn't going to linger on it. Liv had tried to take me down, to paint herself as the victim, and she had failed. As we stepped into the hallway, I heard footsteps behind me. "Hey!" It was Liv's mother, charging toward me with fire in her eyes. "You think you've won? You think this is over?" I didn't turn around. I kept walking, my steps steady. "This isn't over," she shouted after me. "You'll regret this. You've ruined her life." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Her voice echoed in the hallway, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to get dragged back into it. I walked out of the courthouse and into the sunlight, the world feeling a little bit clearer, a little bit quieter. It was over, and no matter how much they shouted or twisted the truth, I knew I had won. I walked into my apartment that afternoon, feeling lighter than I had in months. The air felt different now, like I could finally breathe again. The ordeal with Liv, all her lies and her manipulations, had come to a screeching halt, and for the first time, I felt like I was on solid ground. The quiet of the apartment was comforting, a far cry from the chaos she had dragged me into. I hadn't realized how much noise her presence had made in my life until it was gone. No more constant texts or social media posts. No more watching my back every time I left the apartment. The worst was finally over. I grabbed my phone from the table, and the first thing I saw was an alert about Liv's Instagram. Her follower count had dropped off dramatically. She'd been posting about the court case nonstop. Her victory speeches, her claims of being wronged. But after the judge ruled against her, the support from her followers had evaporated. The hashtags, the outrage, the pity, all of it had turned into mockery. Her reputation was shot. I couldn't say I felt bad about it. She'd done that to herself. I opened the app, scrolled through her feed, and couldn't help but feel a strange satisfaction. The posts were still there, but they were getting fewer likes, fewer comments. Her tone had shifted too, less confident, more desperate. Taking him down had turned into seeking justice, to trying to heal. It was like watching someone try to cover up the mess they'd made with fresh paint, but the cracks were still there, too obvious to ignore. I leaned back on the couch, scrolling through the endless reminders of the past few months. The crazy thing was, none of it had been about the apartment or the breakup or any of the things she claimed. It had always been about control. She wanted to rewrite the story, make me the villain, but the truth had a way of sticking. My phone buzzed again, pulling me out of my thoughts. Another text. This one from Matt. Saw the verdict. Glad it's over, man. You good? I typed back quickly. Yeah, all good. It's finally over. But was it? I was still cautious. New locks on the doors, a more secure system for deliveries, even an extra layer of privacy on social media. I wasn't going to let my guard down entirely. There were still people who believed her version of events, and I knew that was going to take time to change. It always does. But in the back of my mind, I knew I was safe. The worst was behind me. I thought about how far she'd gone to try and make herself the victim. The lies she told, the way she twisted the truth until it was unrecognizable. The lengths people will go to when they think they're entitled to something, or when they want to manipulate others into believing their version of the world. But the thing that stayed with me the most wasn't the anger or the frustration. It was how badly it all had backfired. I hadn't played her game. I hadn't responded to the drama or tried to match her lies with my own. I just let the truth unfold. The truth will always come out, no matter how many stories you spin, no matter how many people you try to fool. I'd learned that the hard way, and now that it was over, I finally felt like I could live my life again. The sun was starting to set, casting a warm glow across the room, and for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace.